thank you everyone for being here today. We're going to go ahead and begin. Just so you know, if there's any questions afterwards, we'll take a few questions. If there's anything unrelated to our conference today, if you will please either get with me or Alicia Manzano, who's sitting here in the front, we can answer those questions to the side or follow up with you via email. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce Deputy Chief Harold Medina, and we'll go ahead and start.
Thank you everybody for being here this afternoon for this mid-year update on our crime statistics. I want to thank Commander Collins for welcoming us to the Foothills Area Command to have this press conference. Just some quick stats on the Foothills Area Command and the work that he's done out here is we track 4 different categories of shootings, and the overall reduction in the foothills for those categories are a negative 33% in terms of shootings. And his property crimes is down overall 27% in the foothills. So thank you, Commander Collins, for the work you do and the work that your officers are doing day in and day out and working with the community to make it safer. Mayor Keller is going to walk through the mid-year crime stats, but first I want to provide a little context. I want to highlight the first 2 slides showing UCR stats we reported for 2018. The FBI will be reporting these numbers in a few months with comparison to other departments. This data from 2018 is down from the previous year. We're tracking to continue this decline through 2019. First, property crime is down 17%, and violent crime was down 1% from 17 to 18. APD is taking proactive measures to reduce crime. You will see we increased traffic stops 36% last year, and we're already up an additional 11% this year. The mayor is going to show you the most up-to-date 2019 crime stats for Albuquerque. While they are subject to change, we are confident that the crime is continuing to go down, and that includes violent crimes. With that, I'd like to introduce Mayor Tim Keller. Mayor.
All right, well, good afternoon, and a couple of things. We also have our CAO here as well, Sarita Nair, who I think most folks recognize. Just a little bit about the data that we're going to share. This is, as Deputy Chief mentioned, so what we've been trying to do every quarter is release the latest quarterly data that we have. That data then gets sent to the FBI, which then like 6 months later comes back as the FBI stats. So just reminding folks, these are the same numbers we've always been using. What we have here today, though, is the first time we have an annual snapshot coming back after those quarterlies from the FBI. So for the first time, at least for our administration, we're able to compare more or less like when we came in for a year. And so that's what we're going to be going over now. The other slice is that more recent piece that, of course, is going into the FBI, which is the 2019 data. So, you know, it is what it is, depending on how you want to look at it, but just wanted to let folks know about that. So firstly, a couple of things. I, of course, want to acknowledge City Council for their efforts in helping to fund all these initiatives. Also, of course, the leadership team at APD, very much appreciate their efforts. This is obviously a reflection of a lot of hard work, both at the top and the middle and the front line at APD. Now, want to emphasize what we just heard from a year-over-year perspective for the first time since we've been tracking this, at least in 5, 6 years or a decade, depending on how you want to look at it. For the first time, the annual year-over-year data is actually all down. That is, of course, the right direction. And so that's something we very much want to see, and we believe it indicates some progress. But I also want to be very clear that the job is not done. Crime is still far too high, and the fight is nowhere near being over. This is something that for us is about a long-term sustained effort that we have deep resolve around. And what we're sharing today at least shows that we believe these efforts are at least pushing us in the right direction. And so we think we have some good indication about what's working, maybe some things that we need to tweak a little bit, and how we can actually sustain this effort over the next several years. Now, a big piece of this has been the addition of new officers, whether it was supplementary officers from other departments in the state that we used a little bit in the spring, or our more sustained effort to try and bring in 100 new officers. We announced a couple of weeks ago we've hit that goal, and those 100 new officers have come in over time. Some of them are laterals, some of them are new hires, and they have a real ripple effect when it comes to their impact on the department, because as we fill out that front line with sort of fresh resources, we're able to move folks into specialty areas. And that includes things like our gun violence work. It includes even our robbery. Every piece of investigative and detective work that we do is enhanced by those folks coming in the front line. So they come onto the front line, we're able to move folks off the front line into specialty work. Even some of the things we're doing now with CYFD and our Crimes Against Children unit. In many ways, they're all related to solving this shortage. And so we believe that we're starting to see some of the very initial fruits of that additional 100 officers. And of course, we need 300 more. So we're going to keep our goal for 100 each year until we get to 1,200, hopefully in the next 3 years. So with respect to the specific statistics, let's look at some of these, beginning with property crime. You know, we know, I think it came out in several studies that on a year-over-year basis, still, unfortunately, we're at the same position we were last year. But we have made lots of progress, and I think the numbers certainly bear that out. And so if you look at it on a year-over-year basis, auto burglary is down 53%, auto theft is down 51%, and commercial burglary is down 38%, and residential burglary is down 44%. And you can see how that breaks down right there. And by the way, the percentages I'm saying are the additions of the two percentages you see here. That's how we're getting the annual number. Violent crime, let's see, sorry, we might, okay. So right here, yeah, you can see what I sort of just read out. So this is the year-over-year comparison when we look at that. And so again, numbers moving in the right direction, that's encouraging. Obviously, though, the absolute number is still very high and much more work to do. Now, violent crime is a similar story. Unfortunately, of course, this is our toughest challenge, and it continues to be our toughest challenge. But we can see here at least a trend here where robbery down 65%, homicide down 18%, rape down 35%, aggravated assault down 33%, and shootings with injury down 8%. Again, that's an area where we've had some of the most challenges, especially right here with shooting with injury. But at least, again, for the first time in years, these trends are going in the right direction. Historically, all of these have been going up until about 2017. So here you can see the totals that I read off to you initially. And so, you know, this is, you know, no matter how you look at it, a very significant decrease. So I don't want to lose sight of that. We know that if there's one victim of a crime, for them, the crime rate is 100%. So that's not lost on us each and every day. But we also, I think, need to understand that these numbers going in the right direction, at least, are good directionally for the city as a whole. Okay, so now to go into a little bit more of this and talk about some of the things we're doing, especially around violent crime. Our Chief of Police, Mike Geier. Chief?
Thank you. These stats are really encouraging because they show we're moving in the right direction. As the mayor emphasized, we still have a lot of crime in the city, and we have a lot of work to do as we move forward. I know it's difficult for people to come to grips with the fact that crime is being reduced, especially if you're a victim of a crime. As the mayor said, that's all important to that individual at the time. And we understand this because we work with victims every day, and we fight for victims every day. That's why even though we're making steady progress to reduce crime, we want to be really forthcoming with these kind of, you know, events and to showcase the information that we receive and get this out in a timely manner for the media as well as for the public. Last year we talked about the dramatic drops we saw in property crimes, but we also talked about actually the problems we're having in terms of the trends with violent crimes, particularly gun violence. And we said that why we did more work to reduce property crimes, that would have an effect on reducing violent crimes, and we're starting to see a little bit of that effect taking effect this year. What we didn't plan for, what we didn't just hope for is that this would just happen, you know, by itself. We know we had to come up with plans, and we implemented a multi-pronged approach to tackle the gun violence in our city, and we're still underway with that particular program right now. So we're starting to see these results, but again, we know that people are still being victimized every day. So my message to the people of Albuquerque is that today, we're not going to let up. We're putting more officers on the streets. We're ramping up our investments in community policing, and we're working as one Albuquerque with all our partners to keep the public safe. Thank you. And I will now return it to Deputy Chief Medina.
You know, before we take questions, I just want to give a little more about our ongoing efforts to reduce gun violence. we are focusing on breaking down gun violence even more and understanding it more and more. And we have different categories such as a homicide involving a firearm, a shooting with injury, shooting with no injury, and a shooting with property damage. One of the things that we did notice that as we started to break this out into categories and researching each category more is that of our shootings with injuries, which are 94, 19 of those were accidental shootings where gun owners accidentally shot themselves while handling their firearm. And we want to look at the 75 intentional shootings and understand where they're happening, where do we put resources into these areas, how do we deal with this epidemic of gun violence in these specific communities. But we also have to take a look at how do we help the community with education. For 19 individuals to have accidentally shot themselves, we have to look how do we provide some sort of public education to also reduce that that number so that we don't have so many people victimized with accidental shootings. So we are tracking a lot of different information and we're planning a lot of different strategies that just don't focus on what historically police departments would consider enforcement-based. Working with the community and providing that education is going to be key for us to be able to sustain a lowering of these crime rates. Thank you. With that, we'll take questions.
What strategies have you guys found have been most helpful?
Yeah. So, since I was talking to the chief, the question was what strategies have been most helpful. I'll hand it over to them, but I do want to mention one thing. Internally, we refer to them as PRTs, these problem response teams. These are externally what are our sort of strategic community policing initiatives in downtown, central and Unser, and of course, most recently in Nob Hill. These have been tremendously successful, both in terms of data and in terms of community involvement. But I think they're also showing how valuable they are, that in the long term, we want them to basically be all over town. But that is also a function of resources. Right now, we can only have as many intensive community policing teams as our resources allow. So we've got 3, but we want to roll out more and more every 6 months, as long as we can continue to get those resources.
So the question again?
What's the most
Strategies.
helpful?
Most strategies. Well, there's been a couple. As you can see, the traffic stop itself, and when the state police was here, that was even more evident. We just did a training last Friday where officers are taught about we're doing more traffic enforcement in high crime areas. Serves 2 purposes, obviously. That's where you have the people, the ingress and egress from the areas where crime is being committed. But the data is showing that probably we don't even with these great numbers, we're not doing as many as we could. Some of the national data shows 1 out of 3 traffic stops will result in an arrest of somebody with a warrant or finding stuff in the car. So that's our first emphasis, because that involves the majority of the department, the officers that are out there every day trying to do proactive stuff. The NIBINS program, the scientific evidence has been great. It's moving along at a quicker pace now. We're getting more collection of data. We're getting more information in terms of putting that in the analytically together so we can identify people and the weapons used in these crimes. We're doing a lot more hotspot type locations where we're identifying locations that we need to put more emphasis on, as well as more direction toward offender-based. There's a lot of violent offenders that are committing most of these crimes. And what we find is when we catch these people and using our federal partners, is now we have a task force with the FBI, we can get them prosecuted and then they're gone for a long time. The reductions in robbery significantly is because of the fact that the serial robbers that and we can talk to this as well, the serial robbers that we've got in the past were able to get on state charges, would be out on the street for a very short period of time before they committed more robberies, and maybe 10, 12 more robberies were committed. Now we get them on federal charges, they're sitting in federal prison, and we saw these numbers just drop. So again, with the same approach toward gun violence is getting those people, there's a lot of guns still on the streets in Albuquerque, as well as another strategy is the community outreach, getting people to lock their cars, make sure the guns are safe in houses, making sure that, people don't use the guns, in the wrong way. And I think getting people to just understand that concept and reducing the number of guns that are in households that shouldn't have guns in the households because of people that may have domestic issues or mental health issues will also reduce some of the crime. Does that answer the question?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You talked about traffic stops going up, but do you have arrest data for how many more arrests you're making?
Well, we have arrest data. We don't have that today. Because there's a lot of arrests that occur that, you know, or from calls and stuff, so I don't know if we actually have that, could get that breakdown. We could, if you want, we can check and get that information on follow-up.
And I think it's really difficult. We have to be cautious with arrest data, because arrest data doesn't always tell us what the trends are. We know that we've taken other steps within the department, such as the paralegal program, which the latest LFC report stated doubled our indictment rate. So it's not just the number of arrests we made, but how are we getting some of these cases more successfully to be prosecuted so that we could effectively lower crime without as many arrests? Because a lot of times we find ourselves arresting the same people over and over, and by getting these cases into the courts more complete, by doubling our indictment rate, we may be affecting crime rates while not increasing the number of arrests. So it's really difficult to just focus on numbers of arrests and say that they are a single factor, kind of talking about how we've reduced crime through them. So it's a little bit more than arrest data.
Chief, this is for you. One thing I heard over and over when the state police officers, and they're still here, but when the 50 officers came in, was that they could do things that APD couldn't do. And a lot of the APD officers were saying, in many cases, their hands are tied because of these rules with the DOJ. What's your take on that?
Well, I don't know if I would agree with that completely. If you're talking policy differences, there's no doubt that that could make a difference. I mean, our pursuit policy, our use of force policy is a little bit more restrictive. But as far as what police work is, it's all a matter of, you know, being your assessment of a situation, your ability to observe crimes, the ability to take the risk and make a traffic stop and go a little further than just ask for driver's license and registration. And having that state police, that's their presence, is they'll make a lot of those traffic stops for basically sometimes minor violations, but by pushing the envelope a little bit and asking questions and getting people's proper identity, you find out there's a warrant, which results in being able to tow the car and there's guns or drugs in the car. That's the kind of effort that's different. And I think what Albuquerque has been afraid of is first of all, we have more calls for service, and so the state was not really handling the calls, so they had the ability to do that. But I think the CASA kind of puts restrictions on that. Officers are afraid that if they do that, you know, in a haphazard manner, they'll get in trouble, but that's not the case. And we want to encourage them to go out, and actually that's the best community engagement is because a lot of those traffic stops result in a good contact and represents the department in a positive way. And those few that aren't, they walk away not happy, are the ones that shouldn't be happy because they're the ones victimizing our community. Nancy, does that answer? Okay.
Can somebody give us some numbers? How many homicides were there last year this time, or overall, and then this year? We can definitely have those numbers. We can follow up with you on that.
This is good news, but in all your messages, you're being sort of cautiously optimistic. Can you kind of talk about that?
Well, there's a lot of, crime is something that the police have somewhat of a direct effect on, but there's so many other societal factors. I mean, we can't account for how many people are addicts or how many people come out of prison, family situations that go behind closed doors, or gangs and drugs. And, you know, we had a couple incidents this weekend where there's just, how do you be in that place to prevent something at a party or whatever, unless we get a call and we happen to get there in time. So there was always that crime trends that we really, as much as we'd like to think we've got a handle on everything, it's just when we do is something will happen that we have no control over. The murder with the mother and the young daughter, I mean, that's a prime example, is we had no, you know, precursors that would have told us that, you know, it's something that would have led up to that 11th hour or the red flags. Although they were out there, but that's where units like the people that work with domestic violence can do those kind of threat assessments and intervene before. So yes, we're always out, because we don't have complete control on what goes on.
Okay, that covers it. Can I ask one more question? It's about the DOJ being here. Any idea how much longer? I mean, I keep hearing 2 years.
I don't even know if we can.
Well,
I know it's not up to you all, but I'm sure you have conversations with them. Like, how is that looking?
Well, we're making progress. We've seen from the last reports it was a little bit slower this last time, but we know that once we get through this summer into the fall with the two biggest components, which is the use of force training, the force review board, and some other aspects of related to policies that are still we haven't trained completely on. We've got all that approved. All we got to get through that. Once it goes operational, we'll be that much closer, because in some areas we're at 99% already.
How much does it cost each year for the city of Albuquerque to have a monitor, to have the DOJ?
I'll defer that to
We can get you the actual, it's a
The
couple
actual
million.
numbers.
Yeah, it's a couple of million a year. I mean, it's the same as it's
The
been in the
average is
past, so,
about 4.
yeah. But it's, there's lots more we can get you on DOJ if you want, yeah.
If you have any, follow-ups, get with me, get with Alicia, and we'll get back to you on that.
Nice.
Thanks.
Those markers, Hannah?